A very warm welcome from my side. My name is Johannes Käferstein. I'm the head of the Institute of Architecture. And I'm very happy to introduce you tonight to our lecture series, evening lecture series called Architecture and Politics. Tonight is about climate. Next time will be heritage, and then in December on forensics. We all know that architecture is political, and that politics have used architecture for their means, have misused architecture in many ways. But maybe we're not so aware of the fact that architecture and at the end of the day, our environment do influence politics. We had an extremely warm summer, and we can feel the warming, the global warming. Therefore, I think the subject, the theme we're talking about tonight is extremely important. In preparation, not so much in preparation, but this summer a book fell into my hands called The Collapse of Western Civilization, A View from the Future, written in 2014 by Naomi Oreskes, who is a professor for history of economics at Harvard, and her partner Eric Conway, where they write about the effects of global warming from a viewpoint of 2393. So, it's a fiction. It's a fiction comparable maybe to books of George Orwell, 1984, or Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, where they try to understand what happened in our society today, knowing we know all the facts. We have everything in our hands, and for some reason we did not react. Again, it's a fiction, but it's an absolutely shocking fiction, where they predict the collapse of our society, the Western society, for 2093, and for the 300-year anniversary of this collapse, they write this story. They write it from China. Or what then is China? China is a kind of the world has changed. The political systems have changed, and the book is also provoking, stating that authoritarian societies are more ready to resist or to introduce changes in their societies and finally to act, and that our capitalist, neoliberal societies, democratic societies, are not ready for this kind of change. And that's, of course, that is extremely provoking. I think we deeply believe in democracy. A lot of us deeply believe in capitalism. And the fact that global warming will change our world, will raise the sea levels, will provoke enormous amounts of migration. They talk about 1.5 billion people migrating, will have a huge effect on all of us and all of the generations after us, especially after us. So we think we should act. We are trying to do this tonight with this discussion, and Dietrich Schwarz is still not here, but I will give the word to Annika Seifert, who will introduce our guests, and I just would like to tell you the names and give them a very, very warm welcome. Tonight we have Philippe Rahm from Paris, architect, educator, who has been teaching in universities around the world, and Sascha Roesler, architect as well, educator as well from Zurich, teaching in Mendrisio. And last but not least, when he comes, Dietrich Schwarz, an architect from Zurich, who is teaching in Liechtenstein. The discussion is moderated by Annika Seifert. Annika Seifert is with us here at the Institute of Architecture. She's teaching and she's responsible for the studio Energy, Architecture and Energy. She has been working and living together with her husband for 6 years in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, where they still do have an architectural practice. They moved their family back to Switzerland and are doing both lives between Switzerland and Tanzania. So a very warm welcome and many thanks that you could come tonight.
Thank you very much, Johannes. It is indeed my great pleasure to introduce our guests of tonight. I thank you all for coming, and I think it will be worth your while, as we will have a very interestingly wide scope of positions of architects who concern themselves with the topic of climate, also in the political sense. I would like to start with Philippe Rahm, to my left. Philippe has his own architecture practice in Paris, from where he works. He is originally from Switzerland and studied architecture at the EPFL. I just now learned that you also spent some time at the ETH in Zurich, so at both ETHs. I first came across your work at the 2002 Biennale in Venice, still a student myself then, where you turned the Swiss pavilion into a very abstract atmospheric impression of a high alpine climate scenario, which I was very impressed by back then, and as a student that seemed very, very far away from what we were talking about at that moment in architecture education. And I think that is something that has changed by now. Most of our students are familiar with your work, and most of our students are familiar with the topics that we are going to talk about tonight, and that is something that has definitely changed over the past 15, 20 years. Since that Biennale, Philippe has had his work exhibited in many other places, and he has done a lot of teaching. Just recently, until very little time ago, he was teaching at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and is now again in Paris, closer to home, where he teaches in Versailles. Is the chair called Sustainable Architecture? Is that what you said? Sustainable, yeah. Yes. And before that, he was the headmaster at the Architectural Association in London, has taught at the Accademia in Mendrisio, to only mention a few. Wikipedia describes your work as extending the field of architecture from the physiological to the meteorological realm, which might as well be your own definition. I'm not quite sure, but that's what Wikipedia copies from yourself, and I think that's a very interesting starting point, meaning that your main focus does not lie on the designing of a solid form or shape, but on the design of climate itself. Then I would very much like to welcome Dietrich Schwarz to our round. Thank you very much for coming. Sorry for the horrible traffic that everybody here will be familiar with at this time of the day. Thank you for joining us. I would like to introduce Dietrich Schwarz as a practicing architect who has also studied at the ETH and runs his office in Zurich. He is now teaching at the University of Liechtenstein and has been doing so for the past 10 years, the chair of sustainable architectural design. He has also taught at other schools before. I found that all of you have the Accademia in Mendrisio in common on your CVs. And he has been connected to his name has been connected to sustainable building in Switzerland for the longest time through extensive work at his office in residential but also other projects. And apart from his activities as a teacher and as a practitioner, He also is a board member for Minagi, the Minagi Association, which as an organization, as an entity, I think you could arguably say has had a major impact on how we build as architects in Switzerland for the past 15 or 20 years or so since it's been established. So also from the side of certification or legislation, I think that will provide a different and interesting insight. Then last but not least, we have Sascha Roesler. I'm very excited to have him here tonight with us. He's a researcher and an architect, and he works at the intersection of ethnography, architecture, and the science studies, you could say. He currently teaches at Mendrisio, where he holds a chair for architectural theory that is financed by the Swiss National Science Foundation. Is that correct?
Correct.
He has also previously researched and taught at many other schools, including the Future Cities Lab in Singapore, an institution in collaboration with the ETH. And among his publications is the monumental work of Weltkonstruktion, which many of you might have come across, an absolutely incredible piece of a book that came from your PhD work at the ETH. It provides a very wide compendium of what we could call vernacular architecture and the question of how that has impacted our architecture practice within the European architecture culture, I would say. Given the fact that Weltkonstruktion has a major focus on the world, the architecture world outside of Europe, you have also been dealing with a wide variety of cultural but also climatic contexts. And through that, your research focus has often been on climate and its interplay with architecture on different scales. So these are our three guests. I'm very excited to have them here tonight. We will have a short presentation by all three of them, roughly 10 minutes, I was promised, to gain an insight into their work from their own perspective. And after that, we'll be able to engage in discussion, hopefully between the three of you, and later on open the discussion to the floor. I would say we proceed quickly since we are already starting late. Sascha, would you like to begin, please?
Sure. Thank you so much for the kind introduction and for having me. I'm really excited to be with you, of course. And yeah, I will present some ideas and of our work. In his seminal book, The Poetics of Space, the philosopher Gaston Bachelard scrutinizes the fundamental significance of the terms inside and outside for our thinking. Bachelard speaks of a dialectic of division that outside and inside form, and he criticizes, quote, the obvious geometry of which blinds us as soon as we bring it into play in metaphorical domains. It has the sharpness of dialectics of yes and no, which decides everything, end of quote. Bachelard distrusts the real-world relevance of the divide, and he recommends to search for what might be beyond this dichotomy. Bachelard's reflections are of great relevance for a critical re-evaluation of our contemporary thermal concepts, presupposing a sharp division of outside and inside conditions. To conceive thermal environments through this dichotomy is a widespread but more and more contested narrative of 20th century architecture. Rather than having simply blurred the boundaries between inside and outside, 20th century architecture has set up this dichotomy systematically in the built environment by means of its concepts of comfort. Along with the mechanization of the residential sector, a modern metaphysical thinking of inside and outside has taken command, which today coins our most advanced concepts of sustainability in architecture. Until the emergence of modern comfort, buildings have always been linked to the surrounding environment thermally. Microclimates of varying degrees formed smooth and incremental transitions between inside and outside. Thermal continuity and diversity, and not the dichotomy of air-conditioned interior and non-conditioned exterior, formed the rule of human history until the middle of the 20th century. As research in comfort restricted itself on stabilizing and homogenizing the thermal conditions inside of the buildings, the rich architectural tradition of varying microclimates hasn't been cultivated any longer. In the residential sector, great thermal uniformity has been set up at all costs and with enormous energy expenditure. The former differentiation of more or less heated zones in the house has been abandoned in favor of a simple unified solution via central heating and air conditioning. The modern vision of a constant uniform temperature in all situations, seasons, and climates still becomes reality today. However, the other side of the technical perpetuation of a thermal dichotomy is global warming. The building sector contributes substantially, as the environmental sociologist Elizabeth Schauff has noted, to the global phenomenon of climate change. Quote, "The resources consumed in managing the indoor environment are, ironically, one of the more significant causes of outdoor environmental change." End of quote. This applies particularly to the climate of cities that are increasingly affected by this dialectic. Worldwide, 2/3 of our energy is consumed in cities. In the 21st century, cities are not just the main contributors to climate change, they are also struck by it in a particular manner which implies specific and new answers. Although indoor and outdoor climates are obviously linked to each other, their examination has proceeded along different paths and there has been remarkably little crossover. As a consequence, a holistic urban climate science has not emerged so far with comprehensive implications for the discipline of architecture. Today, in order to strike a new thermoclimatic path in architecture, design strategies must reassert the links between the indoor and outdoor as part of a broader engagement with the urban climate. In other words, our today's one-sided obsession with controlling the inside of buildings has to be overcome, and the thermal dialectics between inside and outside of cities to be examined and taught instead. The practice of climate control has to be conceived as part of larger energy landscapes and thus as the result of the dynamics between the urban fabric and the anthropogenic climate. Not only climate shapes architecture, architecture shapes also climate. In the very center of such a new architectural understanding of climate and climate control are, as we see it in Mendrisio, urban microclimates. In our research at the academia, we are investigating the history, theory, and practice of urban microclimates. It was the emergence of the modern city that was crucial in the genesis of a scientific understanding of urban microclimates and thus for the foundation of the new science of urban climatology. From the outset, the practical implications of urban climatology for architecture and urban design have been emphasized. Quote, "The density of built-up areas, the height of the houses, their distance from one another, the width of the streets and squares, their orientation, and their plant life, all of these have their effect on the temperature picture of a city," was how climatologists Albert Kratzer formulated his research hypothesis in 1937. In a nutshell, these aspects were the ingredients for an urban theory of passive climate control. Urban microclimates appear as man-made artifacts of architecture, and the plant cover, the topography, and the buildings are the central thermal means to mitigate or to even control a city in a passive way. As man-made artifacts, urban microclimates are consciously designed thermal zones with various ecological, social, and political implications. In her 1979 book, Thermal Delight in Architecture, the American architect Lisa Heschong described microclimates as thermal places where particular climatic conditions meet specific social activities. Quote, places with desirable thermal qualities naturally tend to become social spaces as people gather to take advantage of the comfort found there. Examples of places with important thermal qualities that are also social spaces abound in every culture. End of quote. As architect, to investigate and to construct urban microclimates requires a sense of the cultural complexity and the temporal dynamics of such thermal places. In one of our case studies in Mendrisio, we investigate the different temporalities in Cairo's informal culture of climate control, adapting everyday life to changing microclimatic situations. Based on ethnographic fieldwork, one of our doctoral students documents the material mediation between the outdoor and indoor microclimates. To create a comfortable indoor climate is a thermal project that receives consistency through its materiality and on several timescales. It consists in a material arrangement that comprises both architecture, everyday objects, and time-specific practices. The informal building sector in Cairo generates high-density building aggregates that are extended horizontally without any clearance by repeatedly building new sections. In principle, windowless, on 3 sides, the numerous recesses, notches, and slots along the facades and in the interiors of the informal buildings provide natural ventilation and illuminate the otherwise stuffy and dark rooms. Contemporary architectural strategies of climate control have to be informed by such popular forms of urbanization in order to achieve their full effectivity, not only technically but also socially. Both the building structures and the everyday practices of the residents provide clues about how the modernization of the urban fabric should be developed further by architects. Both the shafts and the associated practices are indicators for new cooling concepts. Beyond the global standard of comfort, numerous other forms exist of how climate, architecture, and individuals interact with each other. Urban microclimates are associations of humans and non-humans relying both on thermal conditions and the activities of people. Urban strategies of climate control do not necessarily provide stabilized thermal conditions at all costs. Rather, they promote a dynamic field of delightful thermal conditions connecting a variety of thermal places. In the future, architects should focus on creating a thermal environment in and around the building, rather than simply provide a thermal infrastructure within. The distinction between 2 clearly separated spatial areas, indoor and outdoor, is an invention of modernity that we shouldn't take for granted any longer in the 21st century. What's on the horizon is, as our research shows, is the city as indoor, or more precisely, the diversity of mutually interacting urban microclimates which does not follow the blueprint of a binary code. Instead of homogeneously controlled buildings, an extended field of comfort based on the deliberate structuring of the city's microclimates should emerge. It is under these premises that our new anthology, this one which released 2 days ago, promotes the urban microclimate as artifact in different cultural, economic, political, and social settings around the globe. Thank you. And Philippe also contributed to this publication. So
even on the cover, I suppose. That is one of your projects.
The cover, exactly. With the cover.
Thank you very much, Sascha. We are going to continue without further ado with Philippe.
I will take the job. So thank you very much for the invitation. I will present a project in Taiwan. It was a competition we won in 2011 with Catherine Mosbar, a French landscape designer, and Ricky Liu, an architect in Taiwan. This is a 70-hectare park, so it's quite very big. It's on the site of Old Airport in Taichung, in the middle of Taiwan. It's a subtropical climate. And this is a new district all around the park, and this is a little like Central Park in New York. So there is a park in the center of this new district that will be built around the park. The way we did the master plan was very specific because it was based on climate issue. And from this CFD model, we transform it into a master plan on 3 layers. The first was a heat layer, so the red one. The humidity layers, it will be the blue one, and the pollution layer, it's the gray one. And so you can see that we from the CFD model, we create form, and then we materialize this form with dots, and the dots are trees. So it means that where there is more wind, where it's more windy, it will be a cooler. It's like blowing on the soup to cool the soup, you know. It's the same on the skin. So where there is more wind, it's more comfortable. And of course, if you are under the trees, it will be a double comfort area. So it means, okay, we choose the red area are the one with the most windy area, and then we reinforce this coldness effect by placing a lot of trees with a gradation. So it's very dense. It's trees every 2.50 meters in the center, and then it's become less and less. And then we have all the leisure activities that take place on this area. In this cool area, we call this the coolia, so like the America or Australia. So this is the cool lands, the coolia, and to connect all the coolia, we have the cool paths that are like a soft paths that connect all these coolia. Then we did the same for the humidity, because we have the wind coming from the south west, more coming from the sea, and we have some ponds, reservoir of water. There is a lot of rain there, so the park can be full of rain, full of water sometimes. So this is like how the park can absorb the district, the water, the rainwater of the district. So this is a very important part of the design of the park too. And from that we create the dryia, so the dry space, far from the pond and from the reservoir of water. And in these dry lands, all the sport activity are placed, because you could sweat more, and so you could evacuate more heat from the skin when it's more dry, when the air is more dry. And we reinforce that by placing a lot of trees with floating roots that can absorb the humidity of the air. And then we have the pollution. We have some big roads that are near the park, and then far from this road we have all the clean lands, so less polluted, less noisy, and all the children activity find place there. And we have the clean paths that connect all the clearia, and this is a very flat path also for baby car or wheelchair. So this is like 3 ways of moving through the park. And then by overlapping these 3 layers, it creates a diversity of microclimates. So sometimes it could be cool, dry, polluted, or cool, dry, clean, or warm, dry, clean. And so this is it gives a diversity. So maybe during the summer at noon, you will go in the most colder area. And but in the winter at 6 p.m., you prefer to go more in an open field. So it's create a diversity of that. And then this is some image of the park last month. So it will be completely finished in 1-2 months. But this is already some image of that. We can see here the red pass is a cool pass, and we see also the clear pass, a clean pass, and the dry pass. And then, so this is a climatic lens, but I already explained that. This is just to show a little the type of plan we did for that, and also the type of section. This is one of the sections that are on the cover of the book of Sascha. So we are very happy about that. And this is a choice of trees. Also, we choose specific trees for cooling, so with large leaf or a lot of leaf or white leaf to reflect with a high albedo. And this is the way of placing trees are following a grid, very dense in the center and less dense there. And this is always this type of strategy. The ground also is a cooling ground. And the bench are like that, and we can see the cool pass, and this is a dry area, so with high drainage soil and with specific trees also with floating roots, and the bench is more like for sport people, just to rest a few minutes, not to sit too much time. And so this is like the dry pass. Yeah, we can see also the dry ground with high drainage ground. And then the cool area with all the children activities and with trees that absorb some gas pollution or particulate matter pollution with hairy leaf, and also big trunk, porous trunk to reduce the noise. And there is another way of doing that. And then and the bench are more lower, a little for children, or like a sofa. So this is like 3 type of bench. And then we have an intelligent system in the park. So every 50 meters we have a sensor that measures the humidity. We can see the sensor on the left here. So it measures all the climatic parameters, the heat, humidity, pollution, wind, solar, all the type of pollution. And then we can see this every 50 meters, and all the information go to the maintenance center, and we create an index, so you could get on your smartphone information in real time about humidity, pollution, heat, and then after that also all the energy of the park is produced on site. We have 7,000 square meters of photovoltaic panel on the north, 3,000 on the south, and it's like a canopy. So we can see here, this is the south canopy, and this is a north canopy. All the electricity of the park is produced there. And under this canopy, we have some buildings, the maintenance center, and also some landscape. So it's quite strange and very. I like very much this space because it's like a faded exterior. So it's with a mix of nature and building under. And this is image also showing this guy, and it's looked like a rice culture a little, but producing by a photovoltaic panel, and this is typical under that. And so this is like this iPhone, and you could decide you have your position in real time in your geographical position, and you could decide, okay, I want to go in the less warm area and move through the park following this application. And then we have some special things. We have a meteorological garden that made of climatic devices that are cooling the space, reinforcing the effect of the trees. And this is some view of that by cooling by convection, by radiation, or by evaporation. So for that, we use only green energy. So this is geothermal cooling. So we blow with the photovoltaic panel, produce electricity for the fan that blow cold air underground, and it's cooled by geothermal ducts underground. And then it's go up, and it's blow air in the outdoor space. So this is transsolar simulation to calculate the quantity of air, the speed of air, to have an effect on the space. And so this is all the detailed design of that. And this is this type of things that are only, the shape is only based on the pipe and the curve of the air and the quantity of air that are the column. This is a stratus cloud, so this is cooling by evaporation. So this is something quite, everybody knows that type of cooling now, by mist, creating a mist. And so this is like me inside the mist, like 1 month ago. And then we have also this type of desert wind that are also blowing cold air very fast here. This is very big, but it looks small. And this is about radiation by cutting. This is a sunlight, and we can see that the violet light have less energy inside, so it heat less, and so we keep only this cold spectrum of the light. And we have also this moonlight that are like an umbrella to cut this radiation heat from the... And I will finish just by showing one building. We have like 20, 25 buildings in the park with some large building, and one museum of climate change, maybe. And this is the maintenance center. And so the architecture is completely based on climate. So because today, as Sascha explained, we don't have any more indoor and outdoor, because before it was like that. You have a brick wall and you have indoor and outdoor. But today, because of the different type of material you use for creating a wall, you have a thermal insulation made of rock wool or glass wool or PET wool. And then you have the vapor barrier, you have the waterproof layers, you have the structural layers, you have the physical layers. So you have all these layers. And so we decide not to have all the layers on the same line, but to split and to create space in between the layers, so we could be in between the waterproof layer and the thermal insulation. And so it means the air conditioning will be only inside the thermal insulation. So this is a little the idea. And so we can see that we have the first line is like a physical layers, and then we can close, and then inside we have some courtyard and some waterproof layers, and inside the waterproof layers we have sometimes thermal insulation. And so this is a little this type of detail. And so the building is this one under the photovoltaic panel, and we can see here this first grid, white grid, that reflect also with a high albedo. And sometimes you can see the waterproof white layer, or it can be empty inside. And so there is no more fixed limit. It's like a layering limit between inside and outside. And so this is some image of that. And so when you go inside, so you arrive on this first, so it will be all the machine of the park, the people working on the park that will be there. It's completely open. There is only the photovoltaic panel on that, and then you have a roof that starts, and then under the roof you have waterproofing membrane. So this is what you see in these aluminium bitumen sinks, and then this is this type of detail. So everything is made with this bitumen waterproof layers, and inside that you arrive to the thermal insulation that is made by 25 centimeter, like very Minergie PU value of under 0.15, and cover with also textile, and so this is this type of material, fireproof, that will cover everything like a nest inside another nest, inside another one, and then because I think I have finished, but just 30 seconds just to show this Museum of Climate Change. It will be quite impressive because there is 3 rooms that recreate 3 climate. A little one is like what we did in Venice in 2002. We are reproducing the climate of high mountain, and one is reproducing the 21 of November, like endless day, the less dry day of Taiwan, and the other one recreates the climate without industrial pollution, without global warming, so 1 degree less than the real-time climate, and without particle matter pollution. And so we call these 3 rooms clearium, coolium, and dryum. And there is also a restaurant inside, and info point inside. And so everything is monitoring with sensor and that, and the construction. So we can see here the building. So it's like that. So we can see all these layers, also the concrete, and then the water, the thermal insulation, and finally the waterproof, and then this is more recently that. And inside, so this is like an endless 21 of November, repeating light, and this, okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Philippe. We will move on to a very different approach, I imagine, one that you will all be a lot more familiar with. Dietrich, I will give you the word.
So, like you know, I'm architect, building architect, but I will not speak about my buildings tonight, because I try to bring a relation from architecture over sustainability to politics. I would like to introduce the concept of relevance to the debate on sustainable development. The development of our society and economy should not be considered one-sided or determined by abstract science. Rather, it should be supported by a broad consensus in the population and economy. In Switzerland, direct democracy helps us with the possibility of having a vote. The results of recent referendums make it easy to see which topics are relevant in our society. Based on that, and in relation to global trends, I define 5 theme pairs with social-economic relevance, so-called topics of need. In contrast to technocratic standards of sustainability, the 5 theme pairs are easy to understand and easy to communicate because they correspond to real needs. These are megatrends that we as a society cannot escape. With the referendum, the people as the sovereign give to politics a clear mandate. The economy anticipates the trend and reacts. Let me ask, what do we architects do? All following texts are from official governmental publications, so it's not my own text. I took it really from the internet. First, topic of need, resource and energy. This fits to the topic we had before of climate. I guess it's the topic everybody knows and brings it in relation to this sustainable movement. It's a project of me. I don't explain it further. It's a Minergy AP Eco House, so on. So it's really focused on the topic of energy and resource. But what interests me especially is on the 21st of May 2017, the voters adopted the revised Energy Act. It serves to reduce energy consumption, increase energy efficiency, and promote renewable energies. In addition, the construction of new nuclear power plant is banned. In this way, Switzerland can reduce its dependency on imported fossil fuels and strengthen domestic renewable energies. This creates jobs and investments in Switzerland. Here, by this vote, you can easily understand that this is directly related to our work as architects and will have an impact on future architecture. Second topic of need, space and mobility. On the 3rd of March 2013, the Swiss electorate voted in favor of the revision of the Spatial Planning Act. Thus, the sprawl can be slowed down. The revision stops land degradation, ensures a more compact settlement, development, and makes Switzerland attractive as a place to live and work. Suddenly, after this vote, all architects speak of inner city densification. But what is the real origin of this thinking? For this, we consider the next topic of need. Oh, sorry, I have also a very nice example of the colleagues Müller-Sigrist in relation to space and mobility. For sure you know this Kalkbreite project in Zurich. So, to the third topic of need, food and health. On the 24th of September 2017, so you see all votes are brand new, the voters accepted the counter-proposal of the Council for the Popular Initiative for Food Security of the Farmers Association. The article includes the whole food chain from the field to the plate. It comprises the following 5 pillars which are of importance for food security. I don't read them down. If you have time to read them if you like. You may wonder, what does this have to do with us architects? But free after Heidegger, the word being belongs to the word family building. In the German word bauen, the building of the house as well as the cultivation of the fields is included. To sustain, we as architects must reach a new balance between city and landscape. Fourth topic of need, demographics and integration. The referendum on 21st of September 2017 narrowly rejected both proposals for the pension reform 2020. The reform was intended to secure pensions and adjust old age provisions to social developments. We are aiming at people in old age provision, but we are arguing about money. This cannot go well. We need new forms of communities which include and not exclude. That concerns us architects as well. Value conservation and economic viability. Here we speak about economy. On the 25th of September 2016, the Swiss voters voted on the Popular Initiative for Sustainable and Resource-Efficient Economy and rejected them highly. The initiative called for federal, cantonal, and local authorities to take measures to ensure that the economy uses resources efficiently and protects the environment as much as possible. Such generic boundaries do little and are not accepted as a restriction. Rather, we need strategies that are sustainable. Why we do that? We do this not to be better people. We do that to have a quality of life. All our work as human beings should serve our quality of life. Here, architects are in demand as masters of transformation. Allow me a visionary point of view as a building architect in our time. If we acted in the 20th century on the creed of boundless freedom, we must today announce unpopular strategies. But instead of the sufficiency that wants to eliminate the unnecessary and tends to erase even the beauty and joy of life, even the meaning of life, I plead for concentration, your own and that of your own creation. By contrast, this concentration does not lead to an impoverishment, but to a condensation of cultural creation. Culture is concentration of knowledge and ability, its preservation over time and its communication through the artwork. For concentration, we need the ideal that points us in the distance as a lighthouse. In order to recognize the ideal in the future, we go back to the knowledge of the past, our culture. The ideal of boundless freedom of the last century will be followed by return to our traditions and identities, a culture of condensation on the essentials. We should not disrespect empathy and our sense of belonging. For what use is individualization when it leads to loneliness and freedom to volatilization and ends in nothingness? Again, it is the concentration on true values, the community, without which man cannot live, but also the will to recognize, to preserve, and to communicate one's own ideal. As stated in the needs issues, sustainability responds to a real situation, requiring correction in the event of persistent deficit in our behavior. This gives it a realistic, ever-changing approach. It is not the goal to save the world, but we should recognize ourselves as part of the good whole and act as such. This creates quality of life.
Thank you all three of you, for your contributions from your different standpoints. I want to jump right into discussion because we are already running out of time. I can see Heike gesticulating. Johannes started with the question of relevance, quoting this dystopian book, a work of fiction in the beginning. By now, obviously, this work of fiction, only 4 years later, has caught up with reality, and there are a number of scientific studies that regard or consider worst case and even worse case scenarios. What to expect from global climate change, and there is a call for what is called deep adaptation, which you are probably familiar with, which goes far beyond of what we look at as architects and into a much larger scale that then concerns political decisions about moving entire cities from the water shores and similar scenarios. Yet the global carbon dioxide emissions are still on the rise, and even in positive estimations, they are not to be expected to peak within the next 10 years or even more. We easily like to think of big new players like China, or look at new leadership in the US, for example, disregarding climate agreements, etc. But we don't even have to look that far. Dietrich, you're pointing a very positive image of what's happening in Switzerland just now, yet at the same time I'm flabbergasted to read in the newspapers that there is an ongoing discussion about when and how the road system in Switzerland will have to be widened to allow for ever more and ever bigger cars in individual transportation. What do you say to that? You all have a strong relationship to Switzerland, even if you don't work here anymore. How do you see the current situation? Is it really as optimistic as your presentation suggests?
I don't think that my presentation was so optimistic. It's much more realistic. I took only the points what are already reality by the votes. So I have the 5 megatrends. Energy and resources 1. Climate is very strong related to that, but climate is also related, like you said, to space and mobility. And there, the people voted clearly to a change. We forgot this. I guess most of you are Swiss people and have the chance to vote. But we forget how important, or which chance, which opportunities behind that. And architects normally are not politicos. They are not, most of them are not really engaged in politics. They are much more, it was not all the time like that. And behind that, these votes, you can clearly see that people want to change. But now comes the architect in play. We are the specialists of transformation. We are the specialists to build different, like we have seen. We are the specialists to create other traffic systems. But we are also specialists to build for old people, for refugees, to change it. And it's not done. I give you an example. German Pavilion, Biennale, they opened the 4 sides, they made 4 doors and said, now Germany is open. Okay. Also, our university did in this semester all very hectic about refugees. Today, nobody speaks about that anymore, also architects not. So this is not sustainable. If we act only for a short term, it's wrong, but democracy, in Switzerland especially, by the direct democracy, has a very long term, a very calm, you can say also nothing changed, but it's not true. It's a very calm way to change things. And there I see a huge chance, bigger than in the architectural community, to change things.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Now, many of our students, especially in the master's program, come from other cultural backgrounds, from other countries in Switzerland. And I think increasingly also Swiss architects trained here might be practicing in other countries in the future. When policies do not play that positive regulating role as a sort of a top-down approach, is there a grassroots approach, kind of a bottom-up approach that as architects we should feel responsible to seek? Maybe Philippe, you want to comment on that?
No, I have to say that in France, for example, there is some trouble last month, 2 months ago, because there is the Minister of Ecology decide to stop to be the minister, and so it created a big debate in the newspaper in France. But we understand that the people are very confused about what to do about global warming. And I think we need to find the exact figure about the responsibility of building inside the global warming. Because I have some data that say that 48% of the global warming, of the green gas, are coming from building. And inside this 48%, there is only 6% for construction and energy for the material. So it means if it is aluminium or steel or wood, in reality we don't care. It's not so important. If you compare to the 42% of the green gas effects that are produced during the life duration of producing heating and air conditioning and things like that. So it means that I can understand that on the world, it's 42% are produced, green gas are produced by heating and cooling the building. So if it is completely true, we need to be sure about this data. It means that this is what everybody have to do. It's to change the window with third glazing windows and to add 20 centimeters of thermal insulation. This is like what we have to do before, for example, because I was listening to the radio yesterday, and we are talking about screen, and they say they sell a lot of big screen for the World Cup soccer, World Cup, you know, but the energy of this big stream is very huge. So so all the subjects are discussion today. Okay, you need to have a small screen in reality, or you don't have to take the car, but. So everybody are talking about a lot of different subjects, but at the end you are completely lost and nobody know what to do, and so I think as architects we have really to say that what everybody have to do is to have a thermal insulation on the building and to change windows. I don't know if you agree with that, but this is the most urgent things to do against global warming.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because these figures, or the relations of these figures, gray energy versus operating energy, is something that research has found has already long been changing in Switzerland, for example, thanks to standards like Minergie, etc. And the problematic has shifted from that to other questions, right? Because there has been a lot of optimization, possibly to a point of where we can argue whether that is still going into the right direction. And with that, a new focus has been reawakened towards the question of gray energy, which then becomes much more relevant within the equation. That is something I can say for Switzerland. Of course, it will look very different. I can say it looks very different in Tanzania, for example.
Maybe you know the things, but gray energy in the material, if it's only about 5% of the green gas effect, okay, it's important, but it's less important than the 42% of the operation energy. So it's why there is a lot of greenwash effect, about that. People say, okay, this is very ecological because it's in wood, but in reality, it's not so important. And the same for the trees. In France, there is a big increase of trees on the building. There is a little like Stefano Boeri forest building in Milano that become like a super successful model that is
because it's visibly green. It's visibly green architecture.
Very green, and it's look green. But if you calculate, already Jane Jacobs in the 1950 book about cities, she say it's completely crazy and science fiction to say that trees can absorb the CO2 of people, because during one day you produce CO2 and you need 300 or 400 trees to absorb during 1 year what you produce during one day. So it means, and maybe it's more, so it means you need, if you are two, you need 800 trees around you, only to absorb what you produce during one day. So it's completely crazy, it means you need...
But you think with triple glazing and insulation everything is done?
I think.
Okay. Then it would be easy.
Yes.
But still, that's not what you're focusing on in your work.
Yes. No, but I think, for example, okay, so what it means, triple glasses, it means, we did a project a long time ago about that, it's to say, okay, maybe we could split the space in between and inhabit inside the glasses, to say, maybe we can challenge this type of things and create a new architecture inside this new constraint.
Which is something that potentially has to do with the question of sufficiency, right? You talked about the unification of comfort, or our perception of comfort, right? Is it really 20 degrees Celsius and 50% of humidity, or is there something in between that we can live with happily? And I think that's an interesting question, because it asks not only us as architects, but everybody from the human race, right? What do we actually need? What is the minimum? Is there a limit to growth? Also our sort of maximization of expectations and needs.
Yeah, I think there are really fundamental new questions in the room, of course, related to climate change, but also to increasing temperatures within cities. And I would say we don't have the answers. Of course, there are many ideas how to respond to these kind of developments, but I think we also have to be open and to say, no, we don't have the answers yet. And in this sense, referring to your question before, I think it's very important to have the exchange with people from different parts of the world. For me, it's always great to have students from all kinds of parts in the world, and it's a completely different discussion than having somebody from India talking about New Delhi, and it's very important, I think,
exactly.
because it's not a Swiss discussion at the end. What we want to talk today about, right?
But I'm not completely agree with you about that, because I participate to a symposium with you in Madrizio, and there is a discussion, I don't remember who, there is one talk about the cultural approach of climate. It was about Vietnam or something like that, and the discussion was to say that depending of the culture, you could accept different type of comfort, and to say that in Asia, for example, there is a big use of air conditioning today, and it was like importing the culture of the West into country that was using natural ventilation before, or some other type of things. But I'm not agree with that, because humans are the same everywhere. We are all the same, and when you are in Taiwan, they are the people of Taiwan. They are the first to say when it's a little warm that they say it's too hot. It's very hot today. So they like to be in air conditioning.
I not agree.
Yeah. I don't agree either. Really. After raising two genetically Viking kids in Tanzania, I can say that they were genetically disadvantaged in the climate. They really were.
No, there is no. There is something with the skin, because there is some study about cancer, with link to the ultraviolet, but the things about temperature is exactly the same, so it's this is my point of view, and I'm sure I think I'm 99% sure about that. So it's the people of Taiwan. They don't like heat. They just like air conditioning. They
But is that possibly also a result of cultural?
I don't think it's like us. We
change,
we like eating. Like in this room, we don't have the climate of outdoor. We don't like the Swiss cold climate during the winter. So we have fire and the heating system, and they don't like the heat. They have air conditioning. So this is exactly the same.
It's a class phenomenon. You are part of the middle or upper middle class, traveling around the globe, and you meet people from the same class. If you would meet people from the, let's say, lowest classes, they have completely different experiences.
Yes, but this is like
not a cultural thing.
This is
really an income, an economy.
I think
this is like the punk with dog in Zurich. They are sleeping in the street. They have some other type of comfort.
But I guess behind the positions here of the people who sit here is different thinking. I guess when I started my career as architect, I was 100% engaged in technologies to create zero emission building, high-tech buildings. It was in the thinking of the 20th century, of the modernity. You have a problem, I give you a new machine. You have a new problem with the problem, so I give you again a new machine. Nuclear power plants became bigger and bigger. And after nuclear power plants, probably the photovoltaic power plants will become bigger and bigger and bigger. Of course, I know we have to build a lot of photovoltaic power plants, but we have also to change our mindset. And like the 20th century changed the mindset completely from the people. We cannot imagine how different people from the 19th century thought to people of the 20th century. I guess we need also a change of the mindset in the 21st century. I agree with the numbers you said about the responsibility of building and architects. Here I 100% agree. We as architects are really in the eye of the orkan in many, many situations, and we don't realize it. We still speak about beauty and aesthetics and superficial things. It's true, 48%, we are responsible for the energy. But we are also for 48% responsible for resource demand. Okay, and if you say now, oh, wood maybe is not so important because we can do it also with high-tech aluminium, it's true. Maybe there is a situation where high-tech aluminium is right, but in general, also our resources are limited. It's not only the energy. And where comes the energy from? It doesn't come from out of the tap. It comes from still 85% from oil-based or coal-based. So we have to change our mindset and change completely the technologies. And for that reason, again, architects has to change the way to build as well. So it makes absolutely sense to build with renewable materials as well. It makes sense to consume renewable energy as well. But then I tell you, we have the next problem. It's space. Space resources doesn't come from the moon, it comes from here. Okay? So our globe is limited. Do we deal really as architects with these limits? No, we don't do. We have still the primate of architecture and urban planning in relation to the landscape. We still consume landscape more and more and more. We have to realize it's completely wrong. And it's a situation we never had before as humans. We come to the limit of our globe. We were probably already on the limits, but we don't want to realize it. And that's the reason why we have to change many, many, many aspects. And if we are only focused on energy and climate, we are already blind of the eye for the next problem.
Mm-hmm. Dietrich, you talked about the necessary change of, like a change of paradigm for the 21st century on a very broad basis. I think also in that architecture can play a role in the sense that architecture is a communicator with the public, right? It has the ability to strongly communicate ideas or even ethics in the public eye, I think. Johannes briefly mentioned the possibility of what he called misuse, I think, misuse of a building or a piece of architecture or piece of work in that as a sense of being a communicator. Maybe just one more question. Do you have the feeling, to all three of you, that your work has been abused in that sense? You used the word of the term of greenwashing, for example. Have you experienced that your work has been abused as a political argument or commercialized maybe as an idea or as an argument before?
Yeah, if I answer, I started close 30 years ago with energy efficient buildings, and I realized that my colleagues had big problems with that. So the architects community had really problems with this energy efficient movement. They declared that as utopic and driven by physics and not driven by aesthetics. So we kill the freedom of the creativity of architects. For that, I have to say, we are still a little bit stigmatized, but what I see as a teacher, as a professor, the young people are absolutely interested in this movement. And I guess for that reason, yes, I'm not a politiker in a party, but I see my work as architect and as professor absolutely political. Mm-hmm. And that's also the reason why I say we should already go we have already to do next step and over next step. We are far behind. We have the next problem here is already waiting for us because we still have the mindset of the 20th century with the belief in absolutely freedom. It sounds good, the absolutely freedom, but it doesn't work. And we need new quality of life without that mindset. And this is general. This is not only in climate, and then it solves also the climate problem.
Philippe, do you agree with that?
Yes, I think the relation between there is when there is a 2008 crisis, economical crisis, so there is a new movement. It was the end of the architect like Frank Gehry and Zaha did this type of very rich, expensive architecture. So it starts a new movement. And so it's quite successful, this movement, like a little like low profile, cheap architecture that become more relevant. But it's true that still today, there is in some academy there is trouble with the green architecture, with the sustainable architecture. And what you describe, like architects still are interested in aesthetic, and they don't integrate the question of sustainability inside the task. I think it's, for me, very often it's look like when Le Corbusier and the Bauhaus arrive, they work with the concrete and they understand we could remove the wall, we could remove the small window and the roof. We can, because if you are using in a clever way the concrete, you can have big windows and a free plan and all these things. And before, like in the Opéra de Paris, it was built in concrete or in steel, but it was hide with stone, fake stone, And today I still feel when I look to some colleague, Swiss architect, a little like I can say like
don't say names.
No. But no, I can say like Valerio Olgiati building, like concrete and then 20 centimeters of thermal insulation and then another concrete facade, that are completely fake because it's only because in reality there is the structure inside, the construction structural is made of concrete inside, and then you have to cover everything with thermal insulation, with 20 centimeters of thermal insulation, and then of course the exterior of the building is like soft and without materiality, and so this idea to recover it with a fake stone, a little like Charles Garnier, it's very eclectic. It looks like what Adolf Loos described when he say about eclecticism architecture of the Ring in Vienna. He said this type of plaster mimicking Renaissance architecture. I think for me this type of Swiss architecture is like eclecticism.
In the 19th century.
Like the 19th century,
So it's time for a new visionary approach.
Yes, I think
with new possibilities
and because it's really
tasks.
like, okay, I like the tectonic because like the cathedral was made in stone, and so you see the structure. So before it was like that, but today it's no more like that. It's made of, of cheap industrial material, of airtight membrane, TVEC, waterproofing. Things like glass, thermal insulation, and all these things should cover at the end all the building. And the inertia, for example, doesn't work in Switzerland. The inertia you work in Morocco because you have day and night change, so you could cool the day during the day with the night with using by inertia of the material, but inertia in Switzerland doesn't work. So you can. It works only inside if you are inside the thermal insulation, because you could store the sunlight heat inside the slab, but it doesn't work as a material outside the thermal insulation. So I think this is also the challenge to find a new aesthetic coming from this new climate change and things like that, and not to continue a kind of.
If I say something to that. My first point as architect was the belief that we find a new aesthetic by the physics. And my first building was then a completely glass envelope house with a concrete core, so absolutely optimized for solar gains and storage and so on. And there was a new aesthetic because it was a translucent lantern. But I don't believe anymore in this linear functionalism. That's the point. I don't believe anymore in this belief that with technique we solve all problems. I guess the 20th century will not solve all problems with technical approaches. You argument very strong. We have only to change the technique. Okay, I agree. I would say I absolutely agree what you say about this eclecticism, what we have at the moment in this superficial architecture who looks bold, but in the end it's somehow weak. It's also weak in ideals, you know. I'm agree. But I guess we have already to do the next step and not to follow the same path like the 20th century, because at the end we will not solve the problems in the world only by technology. And it don't look back now. For example, so only that you believe I'm not the one who looks back. I built actually now 2 houses. There are aerogel envelopes with 8 centimeters who are passive houses, so you don't need any more 20 or 30 centimeters. We build with vacuum glass, where are much better than triple glaze, are thin 8 millimeters. I'm absolutely in that too. I'm not against it. But I say we need new mindsets, that we are much more balanced in biological and natural circles. We have much more to see what is our goal as human beings. Why are we here? Why we have 8 billion people on this globe? Because we are the problem. It's not the globe, what we have to change and to transform climates like this, like that. No, the people are the problem. So we have to reflect what is our position? And for that, you need the intellectuals. So it's this debate here who starts a rethinking of our positions.
We've gone from politics to construction to ethics. I would very much like to use, you will still get your word, I would very much like to use this moment to introduce the floor for questions to join the debate, because I think this is now really something that goes beyond the scope of work of our 3 guests and really affects us all, or should affect us all as architects. Are there questions, comments, provocations from you? In that case, you all get to think a little, and you can continue your argument.
I want to say, I think we have to be very careful to not, the modernity is a real success, because we were, before, if you are sick, you was dying very quickly. If you have the cholera or tuberculosis or this type of things, you have one change, you was dying very, you have a big chance of dying. And, the duration of life changed from 40 years to 80 years now. So I think modernity is a big success. It's too successful, and so it means, okay, we need to, because of course the number of people on the planet
we explode from 1 billion in the beginning of the 19th century to 8 billion.
Yes, but
if you do this again, we blow the globe away.
Yes,
we
but
talk about a success story for a very small percentage of the planet's population.
Too successful, and what you do now?
So it's why we have to be careful not to say, because it's not to say that science or technique is a problem. Because if you are doing like that, you are coming back to a kind of romanticism, and to say, and this can be a big problem, because it's mean you don't believe anymore in objectivity, in science. You start to believe in religion, in subjectivity, and so it can be more dangerous.
Exactly this discussion I had today with the students. Yeah? Exactly this discussion. And I believe in subjectivity. I believe in emotions. I believe that you as a human being have also an emotional intelligence who tells you what is right or wrong. And I'm very critical with the belief in absolutely objectivistic positions?
I think today, this idea of subjectivity was very strong since there is a critical thinking coming from Adorno and Oppenheimer, and then it's become very popular with Derrida and Michel Foucault and and this type of people that say science is not true. It's a récit. They say it's a story. It's no more a reality. It's more a story. But today it's changing. There is a new movement called sometimes non-human turn, or sometimes it's called new materialism or new realism. And there is a very interesting book, because if you are believing in subjectivity, this is a big danger, because subjectivity is mean if you like red and you are more and me I like blue, because we are completely subjective and we have no reason to prefer red or blue. If you have more power than me, you will say, okay, I will paint in red because I have more money than you, so I will do that. And this is what happened with Berlusconi in Italy, and also maybe with Trump. This is like the power, the one that has.
If you speak about Horkheimer and Adorno,
yeah.
It was not the reason they didn't spoke about Berlusconi. They spoke about Adolf Hitler, and Adolf Hitler was really the worst thing can happen in for them. It was the final peak of an objectivism, of a belief. In a belief in an absolutely functionalism, and a belief in a technocratical way. So, and on the other side was Stalin, who had exactly the same belief with objectivism. We will fight and we will win. And both ended in catastrophes.
I know this type of critique, and this was really
not only because you come now and bring subjectivism together with Trump and Berlusconi.
Yes.
I would only say Adorno criticized the belief in a technocratic belief at the end of an enlightened position where people think they can control everything. Yeah. And that's the point. So I'm very critical to this position that you as a human being believe that you can control everything.
But it's also a question of the matter of scale, right? When you talk about subjectivity, you talk about the importance of our subjective experience of architecture as individuals, if I understand you correctly. You say Absolutely. You believe in emotions, you believe in the physical experience of the individual in space, in a space, not in outer space. And you are not talking about basing policies or political decisions on subjectivity. I think those are two very different things.
These are two different things, because for political decisions, it's not objectivism, it's not subjectivism. It's, for example, in Switzerland, it's democracy. It's a completely different thing. Means you ask people in the hall, and if the majority is for that, then it's that.
Yet
so
we
and
hear
the intelligence is much more intelligence of the total,
But you see that it's a little risky.
Democracy is also risky. That's true. But the other systems are more risky.
Yeah, but I have to say, I don't want to say that we are. This is what because there is a new position today, sometimes called post-critical, and post-critic, and I think this is to create a mix between subjectivity and objectivity. I think what we have to do is like to continue with objectivity and science as tools, but with subjectivity target. I mean, for example, because we from the 70s and we have all this from the critical thinking, we have all this post-colonial way of thinking, all these gender studies and these things, this type of things that is a big success today. So we need to keep that. We need to keep that idea of diversity and not only uniformity like it was during the modernity, because modernity have a single goal, and with the postmodern period we have a diversity of target, diversity of actors.
This is what I want to try to explain exactly.
And so I think that we have to keep, but with some objective tools. So this idea of post-critique is to say the target, the goal is subjective, or is the diversity of people, or is postmodern, but the tools are modern, and we have to combine the things together.
I very much hope that we can continue this even after this event over dinner. I'm going to ask again, are there pressing questions from the audience? Yes, please.
I have a question to Mr. Schwarz.
Can you all hear? Otherwise, I repeat the question.
As I understand you right, that you propose that human culture has to change, and not the technical standards, because I guess you're referring to the rebalance effects and consuming all the energy savings. But where would you start?
It starts by my own position, of course. I start by me. That's clear. And you have to start by you. That's so easy.
It's a grassroots approach that has
absolutely.
nothing
And
to do with policies.
I'm not a giant. I'm not the one who is doing everything right. I came by car with Murphy's Law. I was half an hour too late because I had to change the car. I couldn't enter there. So we are all full of mistakes. This is clear. So it's not, and also it's not to take a proper position. It's not that I come now and say, oh, everything is wrong and I have not a proper position. But definitely, culture is changing all the time. All the time culture is changing. It's also changing now. And we, as intellectuals and architects, are able to be part of this changing. And we as architects should not be the ones who sit in our offices and debates about only about aesthetics and superficial things. We should be active in this debate. Also, if we discuss, I'm really appreciate very much that I have a person beside me who has an opposite position, but we discuss about that, what I think architects should to discuss much more. And the subjectivism, objectivism is a fantastic thing. Also, we as architects, if I take now an example for a subjective architect, for me, Zumthor is such a person. He was the one who saw in a very early phase, I was a young student, and I come from Grisson too, when we realized he was not famous in that time, when we realized things change. From this classic modern Bauhaus, what we was taught in the ETH, comes somebody behind the mountains, a carpenter who builds houses who are different. And this is this emotionality about material. And if you say now, I agree that about the percentage, I agree that technique can help. But at the end, this timber table makes me happy. Makes me happy because I see something, what me as a human, also if I'm a intellectual person, still I see things who gives me the feeling, and I'm now a feeling, not intellectual, a positive feeling of related to things I know, maybe from my childhood, I relate it to nature, what makes me happy. And these are important things. You can say, okay, I do this all superficial. This is, now the next discussion, is it possible to, then you are by the illusion, okay, by the suggestion. I'm not, but, I like it, for example, the opera of Garnier. I like it very much because it's fantastic from a point of space. And I have to say also the Pantheon was not one fat wall, it was multi-layered. So all the time there was always smart things in the construction, but there was always an ideal behind. In the Gothic church there was an ideal behind. By the Romans there was an ideal behind. Where is our ideal? We have in the 21st century not an ideal. You said it's dangerous that we fall back to religion. Why? People had all the time religions. Maybe we have to change it, maybe we have to discuss about it, but to have no ideals, you can call them ideals or religion, doesn't matter, but to have nothing to say, oh, we are all objectivists. I don't see there a way that we really solve problems.
Yeah, I'm completely disagree.
I know. That's interesting.
I think it's, because it's it's very dangerous, this type of attitude, because first, when you are talking about you are talking about the wood, that you are. This is like a little like populist, to talk about because it's wood, but we don't know exactly what's happened with that.
My emotion is positive.
Yes,
when I
but
see
this
the
type of
timber.
emotion, this is, I know, I was student by Miroslav Schick with Fabio Reinhardt, I know all this story about Zumthor and this type of feeling of the material, and I know the story. So I don't think this is our generation. This is this is the last generation was about that. Yeah, yes, to reintroduce.
And I have to
this
say,
type
or
of
to
thing.
believe in
But
technology is the past generation.
no, I think it's not. No, it's. I think we cannot continue this type of greenwashing, Zumthor attitude. I think it's not about that because we are not. But I think we have to be careful not to. When you are talking about religion, I'm very. I think religion is a real danger because it's completely. It's the maximum of the subjectivity. So it's we can no more discuss. And this was what's happened before the Enlightenment, before the 18th century. When there is some war about religion because it was full of subjectivity. So I think. I don't want to say that we have to move. I like too this type of wood thing.
Why?
So we have
Why
to,
you like it?
because because I like Zumthor too.
Okay.
I like because it's part of my my life from my this type of.
If
But
I
it's
may,
kind-
I was
it's
just
kind
going
of
to bring you back
strange that
in.
we are discussing on climate issues, but at the same time we have to refer to Zumthor. And I think, first of all, we have to also produce new genealogies of architects and urban planners really important for these kind of issues. And I think Zumthor is maybe not amongst them, I would say, so from my point of view.
He was an avant-gardist. He changed things. I don't say that he is now the leader in green architecture. I know how to build green buildings, and I do it. I do it technically. I do it I see it much more. I see it more and more. We have to do it smart and not only on the complete focus on technology. We need this balance in between materialization, smart material, and so on. But again, the question will be, what is the motivation? What is our motivation to do that? You could say, okay, yeah.
At the beginning of last century, we had all the avant-garde dealing with the question of the new architecture, the architecture of tomorrow, dealing in a very subjective way with the hope of architecture changing the future. And then you were telling us, Philippe, also you, Sascha, also your book, and you did the same through this, that actually architecture is changing the world. 42% and so on. So you want to tell me now about, speaking now about this changing point of view. Actually, the 2 points of view, the objective one and the subjective one, are telling us that we have an incredible power in our hands as architects or dealing with architecture, because still from the subjective point of view or from the objective point of view, we are changing the world. The point is, are we clear with this and how we deal in order to we can really build buildings able to transport the world. So looking backward, forward is, I think, a possibility. The architecture of the history was dealing mostly, or the classical architecture was dealing mostly with representation of the society, and from the modern up, and also our, I think, thinking of transforming and mirroring, so making it better in a way. So I think you are looking from different points of view, but at the end, the point is, are we going to do something better?
The question is then immediately what is better. And if you have not an ideal who is somehow defined by by a community, not by one single person. I'm absolutely agree. It would be completely wrong if somebody stands up and say, I found the ideal, okay? This is dangerous. But we need intellectual debates about also idealistic positions, and not only about realistic positions. And I still see a danger. I see also a danger, maybe in danger, to see danger as a fear, and fear is subjective, I know. Like you said before, you see a danger in these positions, it's a fear, it's subjective. By the rationalistic position, where you come to the point that the only thing you can control is your mindset, maybe it was right in this moment, but you have also to know 10 years later, Spinoza, who was knowing Descartes, described it completely different. And it ends up by the point that we shouldn't believe that we can control the world from our mindset on. We are part of the globe, of the whole. And we have also to be very self-critical as humans to see we are the problem. We are the problem.
But if you can agree on that, and I think this is what you are implying, Alberto, it's a matter of what drives you as professionals and what drives you as humans. What is your motivations? And I don't really care whether it's objectivism or whether it's an ethical or even religious standpoint. I think what matters is where you are headed, right? And then you have your own why, which by all means should be permittable, right? Is there a specific why that drives you, Sascha? Just a specific why that drives you? Is it research? A researcher's curiosity?
Yeah, I think so. It's really research as such. And as far as I see, this notion of city climate raises so many new questions in architecture, and I really don't have the answers, and I don't think you have the answers.
It's on
either.
a scale that
It's really a completely new topic. It's unprecedented. It's not clarified over the course of the 20th century, although many people were working already on this topic. But I think now with climate change, with global developments of all kinds, we are in a completely new situation. And in this sense, I can't follow you guys discussing on objectivity and subjectivity. So it's not really, I think I don't really understand what you want to point at.
But in this sense, it seems absolutely appropriate that all three of you, instead of talking about, I don't know, vernacular architecture projects, or your own architecture projects from your own offices, you all addressed the question of the larger scale, I think, which immediately came with the title of Architecture and Politics, which makes us think outside the sort of the small private entity of a house or a building. Do we have more questions? Okay, in that case, I would suggest that we can continue the discussion. Do we still have time for a little beer outside with everyone before we head out? Always. Okay, so there's time for beer. I invite you to keep your question in mind and ask over a beer outside. Thank you very much. I thank you very much, all three speakers. It was wonderful having you. It was wonderful to hear you argue from your different standpoints. And thank you, Johannes and Heike, for inviting these three.